Look at the last two digits of your phone number. Hold them in your mind. Two digits. They mean nothing. They have nothing to do with money, nothing to do with value, nothing to do with you. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you something and ask what it's worth. And those two meaningless digits, the ones you're still holding, are about to change your answer. You won't feel it happen. That's the entire point. Because there is a number working on you right now, quietly, beneath everything you think you decide for yourself. And it was never the price. Most people believe they know what things are worth. You walk into a store, you see an item, and somewhere in your mind, a quiet voice says, "That's about right," or "That's too much." It feels like judgment. It feels like yours. It isn't. In 1974, two psychologists ran an experiment that should have changed how we see every price we've ever paid. They brought people into a room with a large wheel, the kind you'd see on a game show, and spun it. The wheel was rigged. It only ever landed on one of two numbers, 10 or 65. Then they asked each person a question that had nothing to do with the wheel. What percentage of countries in the United Nations are in Africa? A spinning wheel, a geography question, no connection between them, none. But the people who watched the wheel land on 10 guessed, on average, around 25%. The people who saw 65 guessed around 45. The same question, the same facts, almost double the answer, decided by a number that everyone in the room knew was random. They had watched it being random, and it moved them anyway. The researchers called it anchoring. The mind, when it doesn't know an answer, grabs the nearest number and drifts toward it, silently, helplessly, even when that number is meaningless. Even when you saw exactly where it came from. And here is the part that should unsettle you. If a random spin of a wheel can pull your estimate of African geography, what do you think a carefully chosen number, printed in red, crossed out, placed there by someone who studies you for a living, does to the price you're willing to pay? A few decades later, a different team pushed the idea somewhere darker. They gathered a room of people and, before showing them anything to buy, asked each one to write down the last two digits of their social security number. A private number, a bureaucratic accident, assigned at birth, connected to nothing about taste or wealth or worth. Then they auctioned off ordinary things, wine, chocolate, a keyboard, a book, and they asked, "How much would you pay?" The results were almost impossible to defend. The people whose social security digits happened to be high, 80, 90, bid dramatically more for the very same items than the people whose digits were low. In some cases, as much as 3 times more. For identical bottles of wine, identical gadgets. The only difference between paying $12 and paying $50 was a number they had written on a slip of paper 60 seconds earlier, a number they all knew was irrelevant. But there was a second finding, buried inside the first, and it was stranger still. Once that random number had set the level, everything after it became perfectly logical. The people who bid high on one bottle of wine also bid high on a better bottle, and lower on a worse one. Their choices were consistent, sensible, rational even. It was only the starting point that was insane. That is how the trick hides. It doesn't make you behave randomly. It sets the floor, then lets your own reasonable mind build a tidy, confident structure on top of it. You feel rational the entire time. You just never chose the ground you were standing on. When the experimenters explained this to them afterward, almost no one believed it had happened to them. That's the signature of this thing. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like preference. It feels like you. Now hold that beside the digits you've been carrying since the start of this video. You didn't bid on anything, but the same machinery was running. The mind cannot help it. When it has no fixed sense of what something is worth, and most of the time it doesn't, it reaches for whatever number is closest, and it builds value outward from there. Your sense of fair is not a measurement, it's a reflection, and it reflects whatever number you saw first. Which raises a question that turns this from a curiosity into something colder. If the first number wins, who do you think gets to choose the first number? Walk through any store now and you'll start to see it. Once you know what to look for, you can't stop seeing it. The price that's been crossed out. The was 200, now 99. That crossed out number is not an apology. It's an anchor. It exists to be seen and then dismissed, so that $99 arrives feeling like a rescue instead of a cost. You were never meant to pay 200. 200 was the bait. 99 was always the plan. And the discount you feel grateful for is a feeling that was manufactured before you walked in. Look closer and you'll notice the 99 itself is no accident. Not 100, 99. Because your mind reads from the left and it anchors on the first digit it meets. 99.99 isn't really 4 cents away from 100. To the part of you that decides, it lives in the world of 90, not 100. A single penny, moving a price across an invisible border in your head. Companies have known this for a century. You have fallen for it your entire life. It's on the menu, too. The restaurant that places one absurdly expensive dish at the top of the page isn't expecting to sell it. It's there to make the dish below it, the one with the real margin, feel reasonable by comparison. The expensive item earns its keep by being the number you measure everything else against. And sometimes the trick is an option you were never meant to choose at all. A magazine once offered 3 subscriptions: a web-only plan for $59, a print-only plan for $125, and a print and web plan also for $125. Read that again. The print-only and the combined plan cost exactly the same. One of them was, by any logic, pointless. But it wasn't pointless. When that useless middle option was on the table, most people chose the expensive bundle, because beside it, the bundle looked like a gift. When researchers removed the decoy, the very same expensive plan suddenly lost most of its takers. The option no one picked existed only to make another option look brilliant. You have been steered by phantoms like that more times than you could ever count. It's in the box that says limit 12 per customer. The number 12, sitting there for no reason, quietly tells your mind that 12 is the neighborhood you're shopping in, and you reach for 4 instead of 1. It's in the word starting, as in starting at $9.99. A number engineered to be the one you remember and almost never the one you pay. And lately, it's on the little screen they turn toward you when you pay. The one that asks, before you've even reached for your card, whether you'd like to tip 18%, 25, or 30. Those numbers are not neutral. They are anchors, placed in ascending order, chosen so that the lowest one feels almost rude. You think you're deciding what's fair. You're choosing from a menu someone wrote to move your floor upward. And it reaches into rooms where the stakes are far higher than a can of soup or a few dollars on a screen. The first price on a house, the opening figure in a salary negotiation, the sticker on the windshield of a car you didn't even mean to want. These are the largest numbers most people will ever agree to, and almost every one of them begins with an anchor that someone on the other side chose with great care. The car dealer rarely starts with the lowest possible price. They start high, then let you feel the thrill of pulling them downward so that the number you finally pay feels like something you won. And if you flinch at the total, they'll quietly change the question entirely. Not how much does the car cost, but what monthly payment were you hoping for? A smaller number, easier to swallow, that hides the larger one behind it for years. Researchers once handed real estate professionals, experienced agents, people who appraise property for a living, the exact same house with the exact same information. The only thing they changed was the listing price written at the top of the page. Some saw a high number, some saw a low one. Then they asked these experts to estimate what the house was actually worth. The appraisals moved with the listing price. The higher the number at the top, the higher the value they assigned at the bottom, for the identical house. And when asked whether the listing price had influenced them, the professionals said no. They insisted they had judged the property on its merits. They believed it. That's the most important detail in this entire story. The people whose entire job is to resist the anchor could not feel it pulling them. Expertise didn't switch it off. Knowing about it didn't switch it off. Knowing about it right now isn't switching it off. So why does the mind do this? Why would something as sophisticated as a human brain hand its judgment over to a random number on a slip of paper? Because for almost all of human history, the first number wasn't random, it was information. Your brain evolved in a world without price tags, without markets, without anyone trying to engineer what you'd pay. In that world, the first clue you got about anything was usually a real clue. The first sound, the first sign, the first impression. Trusting it, anchoring to it, was fast, and fast kept you alive. The mind is not built to compute value from scratch. That would be exhausting and slow and most of the time impossible. So it does something cheaper. It finds a starting point and adjusts from there. It borrows. And here is the flaw hidden inside that shortcut. When the mind adjusts away from a starting number, it almost always stops too soon. It moves in the right direction and quits early while the anchor is still holding part of its weight. You think you've corrected for it. You've only loosened its grip. The starting number keeps a piece of you, every time. In the world your brain evolved for, the thing it borrowed from was usually honest. But you don't live in that world anymore. You live in one where the first number is almost never an accident, where someone is paid very well to decide which number reaches you first. The crossed out price, the suggested retail, the opening offer, the figure at the top of the menu, the percentages on the screen. The ancient shortcut that once protected you is now the exact door they walk through. This is the quiet horror underneath all of it. The machinery isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It's just that the world stopped being on your side, and your brain never got the message. You are not being foolish when you overpay. You are being human, in an environment designed by people who studied exactly what that means. You can't delete the anchor. There's no version of you that walks into a negotiation, sees a number, and feels nothing. The machinery doesn't have an off switch, but it has a weakness, and the weakness is order. The anchor only owns you if it gets there first. So the people who lose the least to it do one strange-sounding thing. Before they look at the price, they decide, privately, on their own terms, what the thing is worth to them. They walk in carrying their own number, and when the seller's number appears, it lands on something instead of on emptiness. A salary negotiation isn't won by reacting to the first figure on the table. It's shaped by whoever says a number first, because that number becomes the gravity the whole conversation bends toward. The ones who understand this don't wait to be anchored. They anchor. In a store, it's smaller and quieter. You decide what you'd pay before you turn the tag over. You treat the crossed-out price as what it is, a prop, an actor playing the role of the real value. You let the Limit 12 sign say nothing to you at all. You read the screen's polite percentages and remember that someone chose them, and that you are allowed to choose a different one. None of this is about spending less for its own sake. It's about something stranger and more personal than that. It's about whether the number in your head is yours, or whether it was placed there. Because every time you let the first number arrive before your own, you're not really choosing a price. You're agreeing to one. Go back to those 2 digits from your phone number, the ones you've been holding this whole time. They never changed. They were always meaningless. And yet, if I'd shown you something to buy at the start, they would have leaned on your answer, gently, invisibly, the way the wheel leaned, the way the social security numbers leaned, the way the listing price leaned on people who swore it didn't. Now widen the lens. Think about every price you've ever paid. The rent you accepted because it sat beside a higher one. The salary you settled for because of the number they said first. The car, the phone, the coffee, the tip you rounded up to without thinking, the 1,000 small surrenders you never noticed and can't recall. How many of those were judgments? And how many were just the first number you happened to see, wearing the costume of your own opinion? We like to believe that value lives inside us, that we look at the world and decide what things are worth. But most of the time, the world hands us a number before we get the chance. And we spend the rest of our lives quietly adjusting from there, never quite sure, if we're honest, where the number ended and we began.